Hi, I'm Lexi. This is Drake and Zach. We are Threat Level Midnight. We are going to be talking to you guys about some basketball stats and how to predict the outcome of a game in a basketball game. So, people all over the world love sports, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, tennis. And with those, people also like to bet and wager against who's going to win. Um, with that, a lot of human bias is involved with a lot of people making those bets. We wanted to remove that to make it a little bit more quantified and so that we can get percentages to predict who would win a home game.
So, in order to predict the outcome of a basketball game, there are a lot of key stats that we need to focus on and put into our model. So, of course, to win a basketball game, it's whoever scores the most points. But in order to do that as well, too, there's other stats that can help give a specific weight to a team of winning the game. So the point or the stats that we want to go over was the team's averages for the first 60 games in the NBA season. The stats we put into our model are points per game, rebounds, assists, steals, three-pointers made and percentage, two-pointers made and two-point percentage, free throws made and free throws percentage, followed by the blocks, team's personal fouls, turnovers, and also the home court advantage weight. That's how we got of how we can predict who wins a basketball game. So what do we use? Of course, we use Excel. Excel, we used it to get our data all organized. We got the whole NBA schedule all by the specific dates. And for those dates, we got each team who was playing that night. So we lined up each opponent by their stats that they average for the first 60 games. And so then we were able to get the outcomes of the first 60 games, but we also wanted to predict who were going to win the last each team's 20 games of the season was remaining. And so we plugged all that information and data into NIME, which is a predictor to help us figure out our problem.
So NIME's a really cool program. I don't know how many people have used it and are watching this. Hopefully you can see the screen, but this is our workflow of how we came up with part of our prediction. Up here in the top left, the orange node is an Excel file, and it's the one that Drake was saying with the first 60 games of the season. So that's our training data. The one below that that's still orange, that's our remaining games, and so that's the data that we're going to predict. So from those, we use some other nodes to be able to manipulate the data, get rid of some data we don't need. We have a node called one to many, and we filtered out the date. We didn't need when the game was played. And then we went to number to string, and from there we plugged that into a logistic regression learner. And then that went into a logistic regression predictor. And then in the predictor is where we take all of our data we need to predict and we mix it with the training data, and we come out with another Excel file that has our predictions in it. From those predictions, we were able to come out with 15 of the 16 teams that made it to the playoffs. But NIME didn't do it quite enough for us. We actually needed to do a little bit more to be able to get an actual probability. And so that required a program called Python. It didn't really make any sense to us. We don't know how to use it, and so we actually had to tap Professor Barlow's knowledge on that program to be able to use what we got from NIME, plug that into Python to be able to pull out probabilities for each of those games.
So once we were able to find a model of how to predict an outcome of a basketball game, we then wanted to take it a step further and predict the first round of the NBA playoffs. So we used the same stats that we used for the first 60 games. And then also with using Python, that was able to give us the specific percentages of what the home team would win against their opponent. And so that's how we were able to predict the first round of the playoffs.
So we took those games, we put them into Excel, and then we took the probabilities from Python, and we were able to create a table and make up a match with a little bit of randomness to be able to predict who would win 4 games out of 7. And then from there, we took that other one step further, and we ran 500 simulations for each of the matchups to be able to come up with a probability or a percentage of which team we thought would win. And so it's kind of cool to be able to see the statistics and how what we know from real life and what we know from being fans, to also seeing what the computer is telling us. And so for the Eastern Conference, most fans I think would agree that the Eastern Conference is the weaker conference right now. And you can see that the stats kind of show that. So the Bucks versus Pistons, it gives them an 88.8% chance of winning that series and moving on to round 2. For the Celtics and the Pacers, it's a 63.4% chance the Celtics will move on. The Raptors have a 73.2% chance of moving past the Magic. And the 76ers have an 80% chance of moving past the Nets into round 2 of the playoffs.
Now for the Western Conference, we have our first series is the Warriors and the Clippers. The Warriors have about an 83% chance of moving on. The second series is the Rockets versus the Jazz, which the Rockets have about a 60% chance of moving on to the second round. The next series is the Nuggets versus the Spurs. The Nuggets have around a 57% chance of winning that series. Now the last series for the Western Conference is the Trailblazers versus the Thunder. And the Trailblazers have nearly 60% chance of winning. And just like what Zach said, it's pretty cool to look, to take a step back and look at these predictions as a fan and see, the numbers. The Western Conference is obviously a lot better than the Eastern Conference, meaning there's better teams. The players on the teams are a lot better. And so besides the Warriors and the Clippers, that's a pretty significant, probability of the Warriors winning. Each team is each series is pretty close together, a 60-40, favoring the team who has the 7th game at their home court. And so it's really cool to see that our model was able to predict, which teams were really good and able to move on to the next round.
So with where our model may be a little flawed is if a player gets injured, like a really critical player gets injured, or they get someone sick, or they just have an off night. It's really hard to calculate it by team how that affects the percentages of that team winning. So to take that a step further, we would have to look at the individual stats rather than this team as a whole stat. And in order to do that, we would definitely have to use Python and KNIME to expand our model and to come out with a better, more precise prediction of who would win the team. Thank you for watching, and hope you guys have a wonderful night.